The Sinister Smiler. Part 1. The First Contact. In the quiet suburb of New Orleans, life proceeded with the gentle monotony typical of small-town existence. The neighborhood was a tight-knit community where everyone knew each other, and the most excitement came from the annual summer fair or the high school football games that united everyone under Friday night lights. It was here, among the quaint homes and meticulously kept gardens, that Tom Harding lived. Tom was a freelance writer, working from the comfort of his home office, overlooking his small but vibrant garden. His life was uneventful, to say the least, filled with the routine of deadlines and the occasional coffee with neighbors. However, that tranquility was about to be shattered in a manner he could never have anticipated. It began innocently enough, on a Tuesday afternoon that promised nothing out of the ordinary. Tom was deep in thought, staring at the blinking cursor on his screen, when his phone vibrated with an incoming message. Expecting it to be a reminder, or perhaps a message from a friend, he picked it up without a second thought. The message was from an unknown number, and it contained only an emoji, a smiley face. Not the typical smiley one might use to punctuate a friendly message, but one that was slightly off. The smile was too wide, the eyes too empty. It was unsettling, and Tom's initial reaction was to dismiss it as a wrong number or a misplaced joke. He tried to respond, asking who it was, but the message wouldn't send. The number simply didn't exist. Tom shook off the unease that had settled in his gut and returned to his work, attributing the message to a glitch or a prank. But as dusk turned to dark outside his window, the sense of unease grew. He found himself glancing at his phone repeatedly, half expecting another message, but none came. Later that night, as Tom lay in bed trying to sleep, the image of the creepy, smiley face lingered in his mind. It was just a joke, he told himself, trying to dismiss the growing fear that something was amiss. However, the night was far from over, and Tom was about to discover that some jokes were a prelude to nightmares. Around midnight, his phone vibrated again. This time, the chill that went down his spine was not from the cold air of the night, but from what he saw on the screen. It was another message from the same unknown number, but instead of an emoji, it was a picture. The photo was taken from outside his house, looking in through the living room window. The quality was grainy, taken from a distance, but the intent was clear. Someone was watching him. But what truly froze Tom's blood was the figure in the foreground, a dark silhouette standing in his garden, wearing what appeared to be a white mask, a grotesque caricature of a smile plastered across it. Tom's heart pounded in his chest as he rushed to the window, peering into the darkness of his garden. Nothing stirred, and the figure from the photo was nowhere to be seen. Had it been a trick of the light? A clever Photoshop designed to scare? Or had someone truly been there watching him, sending him a message? The questions swirled in his mind as he dialed the police, reporting the incident. They promised to patrol the area, but Tom knew sleep would be elusive. The Sinister Smiler had breached the sanctity of his home with nothing more than a message, leaving behind a lingering question. What did it want with Tom Harding? As dawn broke over New Orleans, the quiet suburb awoke, oblivious to the fear that had taken root in Tom's heart. But he knew that the Sinister Smiler was more than a figment of his imagination, a harbinger of darker days to come. And so began a tale of terror that would unravel the fabric of his serene life, thread by thread. Part 2. Shadows and Whispers. The morning after the unsettling incident, Tom Harding awoke to a neighborhood that seemed blissfully unaware of the shadows that had crept into his life. The sun shone brightly, birds chirped, and neighbors greeted each other with smiles as they embarked on their daily routines. But for Tom, the world had shifted on its axis. The safety of his home, once taken for granted, now felt fragile, vulnerable to the whims of a stranger who watched from the darkness. Determined not to let fear rule his life, Tom tried to immerse himself in work, but the attempt was futile. His concentration was shattered, every creak and whisper of the house a reminder of the night before. The image of the masked figure with its grotesquely wide smile was etched into his mind, turning every shadow into a potential harbinger of dread. As the day wore on, Tom's anxiety only grew. He found himself checking his phone compulsively, half expecting, half dreading another message. But none came. The silence, rather than offering solace, seemed to mock him, a quiet before the storm he feared was coming. His fears were not unfounded. As dusk approached, casting long shadows across the garden where the figure had stood, Tom received another message. This time, it was a video. Hesitant, his finger hovered over the play button before determination took hold. He needed to face whatever this was. The video was brief, a static-filled glimpse of the masked figure standing at the edge of his garden, under the cloak of night. Then, the figure turned slowly, pointing towards the street, before the video cut to black. The message was clear, even if its meaning was not. The phantom was not confined to the shadows of his garden. It was a presence in the world beyond, a specter that haunted the periphery of his existence. Fueled by a mix of fear and the need to understand, Tom ventured outside, following the direction the figure had pointed. The streets were quiet, the familiar paths now seeming alien and threatening. He walked without direction, driven by an instinct he couldn't explain, until he found himself standing before an old, dilapidated house at the edge of the neighborhood. It was a place forgotten by time, its windows boarded and its gardens overgrown. A chill ran down Tom's spine as he realized the house had always unsettled him, but he'd never had reason to approach it before. Now, it felt as though the house was waiting for him, its silence a siren call. As he stood there, contemplating the house's darkened windows, a sudden movement caught his eye. A shadow passed behind one of the boards, fleeting but unmistakable. Someone, or something, was inside. The realization hit Tom like a physical blow, his heart racing with adrenaline. Was the Sinister Smiler inside? Was this a trap or a clue meant to lead him to answers? His curiosity, intertwined with fear, propelled him forward, towards the house that seemed as much a part of the mystery as the masked figure itself. Stepping onto the property, Tom felt the air grow colder, the whispers of the past swirling around him. The house, in its decay, held secrets, whispers of tragedies long forgotten. It was as if the very walls were imbued with a sense of dread, a testament to the unseen horrors that lurked within. With each step, Tom's resolve strengthened. He was no longer just a victim of the Sinister Smiler's games. He was a seeker of truths hidden in the shadows of New Orleans. What he would find in the house he couldn't have imagined, but there was no turning back. The path forward was shrouded in darkness, but it was the only way to bring the phantom into the light. Part 3. The House of Secrets. Tom Harding stood at the threshold of the old house, its door slightly ajar as if inviting him into its depths. The air was thick with the smell of mold and decay, a testament to years of neglect. With a deep breath, he pushed the door open, the creaking sound echoing through the silent halls, announcing his entrance to whatever awaited him inside. The interior was shrouded in darkness, the light from the setting sun barely penetrating the grimy windows. Tom's eyes slowly adjusted, revealing a foyer covered in layers of dust, adorned with faded wallpaper that spoke of a bygone era. The house felt as if it had been locked away from the world, a capsule of the past untouched by time. As he moved cautiously forward, the floorboards groaning under his weight, Tom couldn't shake the feeling that he was not alone. It was as though the house itself was watching him, its secrets hidden in the shadows that danced along the walls. The air felt charged, a static tension that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. He explored the ground floor, finding remnants of the house's former life, a grand piano covered in dust sheets, portraits of people long gone, and furniture that hinted at a once lavish lifestyle. But amidst the decay, Tom found no sign of the Sinister Smiler or any clue as to why he was drawn here. It wasn't until he reached the staircase leading to the upper floors that he found something out of place. On the bottom step lay a single, pristine white feather, its purity stark against the filth around it. It was as if it had been placed there deliberately, a breadcrumb on a trail that Tom felt compelled to follow. With each step he took upwards, the atmosphere grew heavier, the silence more oppressive. The second floor revealed more of the house's decay, but also something unexpected. A door, slightly ajar, from which a faint light emanated. Tom approached, his heart pounding in his chest, unsure of what he might find. The room beyond was a stark contrast to the rest of the house. It was clean, almost meticulously so, with a desk and a chair facing a window that looked out onto the street. On the desk lay an array of photographs, and in the dim light, Tom could see they were all of him. There were pictures of him in his garden at the supermarket, walking the streets of New Orleans, moments of his life captured without his knowledge. The realization hit him with a wave of nausea. The Sinister Smiler had been stalking him, documenting his every move. Among the photos, one stood out, a picture of the masked figure standing in the same room, pointing towards a bookshelf laden with old tomes and journals. It was as if the phantom was guiding him, urging him to uncover the truth hidden within these walls. Tom approached the bookshelf, his hands trembling as he scanned the spines of the books. They were old, some of them ancient, their titles etched in languages he couldn't comprehend. Then his eyes caught on a journal, newer than the rest, its cover plain and unadorned. He pulled it from the shelf, the leather cover cool to the touch. Opening it, he found it was a diary, the entries written in a hurried scrawl. They spoke of the house, of a family cursed, and of a pact made with a darkness that demanded a tribute every generation. The Sinister Smiler was no random stalker. It was a guardian of the curse, a keeper of the pact made by the house's original owners. The last entry was dated a week ago, its message clear. The time for the next tribute was approaching, and Tom was the chosen one. The masked figure wasn't just watching him. It was waiting for the moment to claim him, to fulfill the pact and continue the cycle of the curse. Tom closed the journal, a cold dread settling in his heart. The mystery of the Sinister Smiler was unraveling, revealing a truth more horrifying than he could have imagined. The house, the phantom, the curse, they were all connected, threads in a tapestry of darkness that had now ensnared him. As the reality of his situation sank in, Tom knew he had to find a way to break the curse. The answers lay within the walls of the old house, hidden in its forgotten history and the secrets that whispered in the dark. Part 4. The Final Stand. Tom Harding, armed with the knowledge gleaned from the ancient texts and the weight of the grandfather's watch in his pocket, felt a resolve steeled by the prospect of confronting the Sinister Smiler. The air of the old house was thick with anticipation, as if it too sensed the impending climax of a story centuries in the making. Under the cloak of night, Tom prepared the ritual in the room where the secrets of the curse had been unveiled to him. He drew the salt circle with a careful hand and placed the candles at strategic points, their flames casting long, dancing shadows against the walls. In the center, he placed the watch, its ticking a steady heartbeat in the silence that enveloped them. As he began the incantation, the atmosphere shifted, a palpable tension filling the room as the boundary between realms thinned. The air turned icy, breaths visible in the flickering candlelight. Then, from the shadows, the Sinister Smiler emerged, its presence an oppressive force that bore down on Tom with the weight of history and hatred. The entity stood at the edge of the protective circle, its mask grotesque, a twisted smile that spoke of malice and delight in equal measure. Its eyes, dark voids behind the mask, fixed on Tom with a predatory intensity, as if it could see into the depths of his soul. Tom's voice wavered but did not break as he continued the ritual, the words of ancient power his only shield against the darkness that sought to claim him. The phantom, however, seemed unfazed, its form blurring as it moved with unnatural speed, circling the barrier that held it at bay. As the ritual reached its climax, the room shook, a low rumble that grew in intensity until it was a roar in Tom's ears. The watch at the center of the circle glowed with a light that was both beautiful and terrifying, a beacon in the growing darkness. But then, in a moment of horror that would haunt the annals of New Orleans for generations to come, the circle broke. The salt, disturbed by the phantom's malevolent will, scattered, and the protection it offered vanished like mist in the morning sun. The Sinister Smiler lunged, its form enveloping Tom in darkness. His screams echoed in the room, a chilling testament to the phantom's victory. The light from the watch flickered and died, the ritual incomplete, the curse unbroken. Tom Harding fell, his body a vessel emptied of life, the Sinister Smiler standing triumphant. The entity's laughter, a sound devoid of joy, filled the room, a declaration of its dominion over the souls it claimed. As the dawn broke, the house reclaimed its silence, a crypt for the latest victim of the curse. Tom Harding's attempts to break the cycle had failed, and the Sinister Smiler, unchallenged, turned its gaze outward, its hunger for tributes unquenched. The house, a sentinel to the tragedy, stood as a reminder of the darkness that lay at the heart of New Orleans, a darkness that claimed Tom Harding but would not rest, its appetite for suffering and souls insatiable. The Sinister Smiler was free once more, its gaze cast toward the horizon, searching for the next victim to ensnare in its web of terror. New Orleans would mourn Tom Harding, but the shadow of the curse remained, a specter waiting in the wings, its smile wide and waiting. Part 5. The Curse. Unending. In the wake of Tom Harding's tragic demise, New Orleans was engulfed in a pall of mourning. The tight-knit community, once vibrant and filled with the laughter of children playing in the streets, had become a ghost of its former self. Whispers of the Sinister Smiler and the curse that lurked in the heart of the old house spread like wildfire, a tale of horror that gripped the town in fear. The Harding residence stood empty, a somber monument to Tom's valiant but ultimately futile attempt to break the curse. Friends and neighbors laid flowers on the doorstep, their faces etched with grief and the unspoken fear that the phantom's reign of terror was far from over. And they were right to be afraid. For the Sinister Smiler, its appetite for souls unquenched by Tom's death, watched from the shadows, its gaze already settling on its next victim. The curse, unbroken, demanded tribute, and the entity bound to the old house would not be denied. As the days passed, sightings of the phantom increased. A fleeting glimpse of a masked figure at the edge of the woods, the echo of chilling laughter carried on the wind, and photographs left on doorsteps, each capturing the eerie smile of the phantom, became all too common. The town was in the grip of a nightmare that showed no sign of ending. But amidst the fear, a spark of resistance flickered to life. Jamie Lawson, a young historian with a keen interest in the town's dark past, became obsessed with Tom's story and the curse that had claimed his life. Driven by a mixture of grief for the loss of a friend and a fierce determination to end the cycle of terror, Jamie delved into the town's archives, searching for answers that had eluded others. Jamie discovered that the curse's origins were tied not just to the house, but to the very land on which New Orleans was built. Ancient texts spoke of a dark pact made with entities from beyond the veil, a bargain struck in desperation that had sown the seeds of the town's doom. Armed with this knowledge, Jamie resolved to do what Tom could not break the curse once and for all. But such a task would not be undertaken alone. Gathering a group of like-minded individuals, each touched in some way by the phantom's terror, Jamie formed a plan to confront the Sinister Smiler and free New Orleans from its grasp. As the new moon approached, the same celestial event under which Tom had made his stand, Jamie and the group prepared for their confrontation. They fortified the old Harding residence, turning it into both a bastion against the phantom's power and the focal point for their ritual to end the curse. The night arrived, shrouded in darkness, as the group gathered in a circle, much like Tom had, but with newfound resolve and a plan born of desperation and hope. As they began their ritual, the air grew thick, the shadows in the corners of the room deepening. Then, the Sinister Smiler appeared, its mask gleaming in the dim light, a silent challenge to the group's defiance. But this time, the circle held. Empowered by the collective will of the group and the ancient rites they performed, a light began to grow, encompassing the phantom, its form writhing in the brilliance. The battle was fierce, a struggle not just of physical might, but of wills, a contest between the darkness of the past and the light of hope for the future. As the ritual reached its climax, a deafening silence filled the room, and then, with a burst of light that seemed to pierce the heavens, the phantom screamed, a sound of rage and defeat that echoed through the night. When the light faded, the phantom was gone, its presence erased from the world. The curse was broken, the pact that had given it power undone by the courage and determination of those who refused to live in fear. In the aftermath, New Orleans breathed a collective sigh of relief. The Sinister Smiler was no more, its reign of terror ended by those who had stood against it. Jamie Lawson and the group became heroes, their names forever etched in the town's history as the ones who had freed them from the curse. But as peace returned to New Orleans, the tales of the Sinister Smiler and the curse of the old house spread far beyond the town's borders. Other communities, plagued by their own shadows and whispers, began to take notice, wondering if the nightmare that had haunted New Orleans might not be unique to them. And so, the story of the Sinister Smiler became a legend, a cautionary tale of the darkness that lurks in the hearts of men and the light of hope that can dispel it. But legends, as Jamie Lawson knew all too well, are born of truth, and darkness, once challenged, may find new corners in which to hide, waiting for the right moment to emerge once again.